Somewhere along the way, RPGs became so good at helping me play them that they began to make my presence feel optional. The game hears about a ruin and marks it on the map before I can even start imagining where it might be. In a room full of careful environmental detail, a glow effect reveals everything that I can and should try to pick up or interact with. Half a world of travel can be skipped in one simple menu click. None of this feels like a dramatic failure while it's happening. It feels helpful, and that is exactly what makes it problematic. This is the strange thing about so-called quality of life features. They rarely seem like something that might make the experience worse. They arrive politely and they save a little bit of time and remove a little bit of uncertainty and make the next step a little bit cleaner. And then, after enough of them have been piled up, I realize I've spent hours in a fantasy world without really needing to learn it. I've completed quests, I've looked at the map, I've sorted loot and followed markers, fast-traveled and chosen dialogue options that were neatly labeled. The experience has been smooth, the game has respected my time in the most obvious sense, but at the same time, respecting my time often seems to mean the same thing as protecting me from the world. Because in my head, RPGs are not supposed to feel like efficient errands. They're supposed to feel like places you lose yourself in. And that is where this modern convenience starts to bother me. A role-playing game needs some resistance from its world. If a town is far away, if a lead is incomplete, or if a character gives directions that requires me to actually listen, the game is asking me to exist inside its fiction rather than just moving through it. Poorly designed friction is exhausting, but carefully designed friction makes the world more meaningful. It makes the game push back just enough that my attention is required and not just optional. A lot of quality of life features remove that connection. And I want to start with the quest marker because nothing changes my relationship with an RPG world faster than a little icon telling me exactly where to go. The character I mentioned describes a ruin outside town, and before that description can become a picture in my head, the map and compass has already translated it into a location. The quest may be written like a clue, but the interface treats it like a delivery address. Once that happens, the world loses some of its authority. I don't need to understand the road out of town, remember what was said, or look for anything in the landscape, because the practical work has been completed by the user interface. And this changes the entire feeling of the quest. I'm still moving through the world, but I'm not really navigating it. I'm merely passing through space. What the NPC was saying turns into flavor, because the marker has already given me all the useful information. The map isn't something I need to interpret, because even a medieval-inspired world somehow has satellite navigation. And quest markers are only the beginning. Once you notice how they move information out of the world and into the user interface, the same pattern starts showing up in systems that seem unrelated. Like minimaps, a small map in the corner seems like basic usability, especially in a large RPG. The problem is what happens after I start trusting the cleaner version of the world, shown in a little circle, more than the world itself. The street in front of me may have signs and landmarks and visual clues, but the minimap gives me a simpler language. It tells me the direction, where the important points are, and how the area is shaped in a way that is easier to process than the actual environment. After a while, I'm not using the town to understand the town, but I'm using the overlay instead. And for me, that is a strange way to inhabit a place. The game has built a world and then placed a more efficient and yet infinitely less interesting version of that world on top of it. Since the efficient version is usually more useful, my eyes and habits gradually move there. The main screen becomes atmosphere while the interface becomes the game. That's how immersion is quietly weakened. The world doesn't have to be bad. In fact, it can be beautifully made. The issue is that the game trains me to treat beauty as secondary to information, and information, more often than not, belongs to the UI. Fast travel changes the relationship in a different direction, and this is where the cost becomes more personal for me. Of course, I understand why fast travel exists. RPG worlds can be huge, and nobody wants to spend an entire evening repeating a journey that doesn't contain anything. But distance isn't automatically a waste of time. In an RPG, distance can be one of the main ways a world gains weight. A remote village should feel remote. Having to travel the road can make a quest feel heavier simply because the journey has to be accounted for. Returning to a city after being away can create a sense of relief that a menu can never imitate. The geography of a world matters most when I have actually experienced the connections between places. Fast travel often weakens those connections. When every discovered location becomes a selectable travel point, the map remains large in a technical sense, but it starts to shrink in my memory. I know the names of places because I've clicked on them, not because I understand how they sit in relation to each other. The world becomes easier to use, but it becomes harder to internalize. And a world I never internalize remains a world that I feel I never got the chance to actually appreciate. Some of my strongest memories in RPGs come from moving through places more than once. A road becomes familiar because I've taken it in different moods and for different reasons. A city becomes a real place because I gradually stop needing the map to find my way. The journey back from somewhere can be just as important as the journey to get there. Fast travel can make all of that disappear before it has time to form. It doesn't always ruin a game, but it often turns geography into convenience. The world stops feeling like a place and starts feeling more like a menu. Another so-called quality of life feature is when games highlight interactable objects. This one sounds minor, but I think it changes the way I look at spaces more than almost anything else. A room in an RPG should be something I examine. The arrangement of objects, the mess on a table, the placement of a chest, the way a shelf draws the eye. All of that tells a story and turns navigating the place into something that feels a little bit like a puzzle. When the game outlines every useful item, the room stops asking me to notice. I stop looking for meaning in the environment and start looking for confirmation from the system. If something glows, it matters, and if it doesn't, then I learn to ignore it. The room is still detailed, but those details have no meaning anymore. It's why different kinds of detective vision modes can be damaging when they become the normal way to search. They offer clarity, but they also turn observation into a procedure more than a way to connect with the environment. The player enters a space, activates the mode, and gathers what the interface has approved, and then moves on. The environment may still have atmosphere, but the act of discovery has been outsourced to the UI. Personally, I take pleasure in noticing something for myself. It can be as small as seeing a book slightly out of place, or recognizing that a room's layout suggests it's used for something that's not obvious at first, or realizing that an object matters because it doesn't quite belong there. When a game constantly highlights everything that's important, that pleasure becomes rare. Discovery starts to feel less like perceiving things and more like collecting things. Conversation systems have their own version of the same problem, and the cost here is harder to spot because clear dialogue is obviously important. Everyone knows the frustration of choosing a line that sounds reasonable only for your character to say something completely different. The answer is often to label the dialogue options in a way that tells the player what the consequences of choosing them will become. The issue with this is that the labels can reveal so much that the conversation becomes more like a control panel than feeling like a believable interaction. If a response is marked as romance or sarcasm or quest progression, I stop reading it only as speech and begin reading it as a tool. And as a consequence, the character I'm speaking to becomes partly transparent. Instead of thinking about what my character believes, what this person might be hiding, or how much risk there is to this conversation, I start selecting outcomes. The scene may still have good writing, but the uncertainty that makes the conversation feel human has been removed. I am safer from misunderstanding, but the role-playing is thinner. RPG dialogue should carry some social risk. Not random punishment and not misleading text, but the ordinary uncertainty of speaking to someone without full control over how they will receive you. If every option is laid out with a clear mechanical label, the player is protected from ambiguity in a way that makes the scene easier to manage, but also much less immersive and convincing. Inventory and crafting systems seem far removed from all this, but they reveal how deep this pattern goes. A bad inventory system can ruin pacing, so I'm not arguing for clumsy menus or needless busywork. Older RPGs sometimes went too far with weight limits and item management, but they often understood that preparation could be part of the fantasy. Leaving town with limited supplies give the journey to the destination and back again a different feeling. There's a risk involved and you have to think ahead. Stopping in a village because you need to restock creates a better connection with the world between here and there. Choosing what to carry and what to leave behind makes the character feel like a person who has limits. Modern convenience often remove that sense of practical weight, sometimes to the point of giving the player a limited inventory. That keeps the gameplay flowing, but the physical relationship between the character and the world grows thinner. Quality of life features keep moving responsibility away from the player's attention and into the game's management layer. The interface starts handling everything for you, from direction and relevance to observation and logistics. Each individual quality of life feature can be defended as reasonable on its own, but together they reduce the number of reasons I, as a player, have to be mentally present. And that is why some huge RPGs feel strangely weightless to me. They can have rich lore and dramatic choices, beautiful locations, and hundreds of hours of content, and yet still feel overmanaged in the moment-to-moment experience. The world contains plenty of meaning, but the game keeps interpreting that meaning for me before I even have to engage with it. It wants me to keep moving and keep completing and keep progressing. What it often forgets is that immersion doesn't come from constant progress. Immersion comes from involvement. There is a difference between wasting the player's time and using the player's time. A game wastes time when it demands patience without giving anything back, but it uses time when the delay creates a meaningful connection between the player and the game world. A slow journey can matter if it changes how I feel along the way. Maybe there was a highwayman on the bridge or a sick woman who needed my aid, and maybe I saw something I wouldn't have seen if I didn't take the journey myself. Searching a room can be enjoyable if the environment rewards attention. Finding a location can be satisfying if the game has given me enough clues and then trusts me to actually think about them. And a lot of modern RPG design is too afraid of that space between the question and the answer. Uncertainty is treated as a problem that has to be solved immediately. Distance becomes a delay that has to be minimized, and observation is treated as a risk because the player might miss something. The result is a smoother game, but the smoothness can become its own kind of emptiness. Everything flows so cleanly that the player is never given enough resistance to feel like it meant anything. That's the trade-off people often miss when they talk about quality of life. The question isn't if games should be convenient or inconvenient. The question is what kind of experience the convenience replaces. If the feature removes confusion caused by bad design, it probably makes the game better. If it removes the need to actually be present, then it may be cutting into the part of the RPG that makes the world feel meaningful. Too often, RPGs polish the interface while weakening the relationship between player and place. They make everything easier to find and easier to process. The player gets more done, but the world leaves less behind. And isn't that strange that a studio can spend years building a setting, writing lore, placing objects, and shaping geography to make the world feel alive? Then the final experience teaches the player to look for markers, icons, outlines, labels, and menu entries. The world is still there, but it has been translated so aggressively that I no longer have to read it. And for an RPG, that is a devastating loss. The deeper promise of this genre isn't that I can complete a lot of quests. It's that I can enter another world and slowly learn how to exist there. And that requires friction, but friction shaped with care. It requires trust in the player's attention and trust in the world's ability to communicate. Quality of life should make the game less awkward to play. It should not make the world less necessary. When the game handles too much for me, I stop forming memories. I may finish more quests and collect more rewards and reveal more of the map, but the journey carries less weight because it didn't really expect me to pay attention. The world becomes something I use and it stops feeling like somewhere I've been. And when a role-playing game loses that feeling, no amount of convenience can replace it. Before you go, I have something I'd like to ask you. What are your thoughts about quality of life features in role-playing games? Which features do you feel take away from the experience, or which features make it better? Execution is, of course, always key when it comes to any feature in a game. The fast travel feature in Kingdom Come Deliverance is way better than how it's done in Skyrim, for example. And if there is an in-world explanation for how the fast travel works, like in Morrowind, it works a lot better in my opinion than just teleporting wherever you want with no consequence. If you liked this video essay, why not give me a thumbs up or even subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these kinds of video game essays, and hopefully I will see you again in the next video.